What's going on? Welcome back to Financial Journey. So today when I talk to you about Lucid, I want to go over some of the current data points, break it down on what's been coming out about the company itself, and go over everything else that you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get right to it. So Lucid closed to 0.91% in the green today, a little low for volume, so 21.9 million shares being traded, 42.1 is the average. Today, in comparison to yesterday, the institutional transactions were rather low. So these are all the transactions that did occur on the secondary market above $100,000. In comparison to yesterday though, night and day difference. So big money turned on the buying switch yesterday. There was a lot of big money getting in, and based on the dollar value, it was kind of assuming that maybe it's a PIF or potentially some big entity such as BlackRock or Vanguard. But no matter what, definitely very interesting stuff. Today there was no news, no SEC filing, so it was rather quiet. There was another article that did come out similar to yesterday's. So yesterday's, it was more so associated to potentially Ford or GM, how there might be a partnership in the works between Lucid and them. Today's was more oriented towards Hyundai. And so I feel like there's a lot more opportunity associated to Hyundai than, for instance, Ford and GM. Because when it comes down to Hyundai, they have expressed that they really want to get into the EV market and make a very big name for themselves. But when it comes to Hyundai, Sultan definitely does do a good job, and he posts this on Twitter quite a lot. But under the umbrella of the PIF, you do have Hyundai. So I have brought this up in the past, the fact that Lucid does have a lot of good opportunity to license its technology out. So we already do know they have licensing agreement with Aston Martin, and potentially if you want to see this as a family tree, you do have maybe a second cousin Polestar that Lucid could essentially do. And then you do have 𝗖𝗢 probably by 2025. Maybe there might be some licensing agreement down the line for that, and even Hyundai. So the fact that Hyundai is testing out a Lucid Air is a very optimistic viewpoint. And plus, technically, if you think about it, it might not necessarily just be a straight up just deal associated to licensing, right? Lucid has their technology, but one thing that both Hyundai, Ford, and GM have is the ability to ramp up. So maybe it might be one of those kind of scenarios that, hey, you scratch my back, we'll scratch yours. You'll be able to help us with production and ramping up, because as soon as Lucid is able to do that, then they can technically lower a lot of their costs, because Hyundai, Ford, and GM have economies of scale, so they're able to kind of have very low costs. And again, that's kind of how they're able to sell kind of lower price vehicles, if that makes sense. So that could really stand to benefit Lucid. No matter what though, when it comes down to Lucid and kind of seeing these agreements or rumors, they usually do come to fruition just about 6 months to a year down the line. Similar to what happened with the whole Aston Martin deal. That rumor actually came out in February of 2023, but it didn't actually come to realization until I think it was, what was it, September, something like that. So we might have to wait and see up until the end of summer potentially about this. So that does mean Q3 earnings. So not necessarily the fastest, but it is good to see that there's stuff happening behind the scenes. As far as what shorts have been doing, this is very abnormal because I watch a lot of growth stocks, and over the last couple of days, you can see that shorts have been increasing their position quite significantly. When it comes down to Lucid, shorts returned yesterday, and same goes for today. So something is up. They are sensing something big coming for Lucid. That's just my own interpretation, of course, because if not, they would be doubling down with a lot of the broader market right now. But 1.17 million shares were returned today. 28.78% of the free float is being shorted. 253.2 million shares overall are being shorted, and cost to borrow average is 76.66%. So kind of interesting stuff. Still, I don't see Lucid being a short squeeze play unless there is a surprise catalyst that does come out. Then you could potentially see a short squeeze, but I think right now anyone getting into Lucid doesn't really care about all that stuff. It's exciting to see and possibly think about a short squeeze and maybe Lucid going double or triple or whatever, 2x, but still, it is what it is. Moving on though, looking at options, today there was $1.19 million in calls being purchased versus 549 in puts. Sentiment wise, 60% of all the options being done today were bearish. So a lot of people behind the scenes, despite big money buying over the last couple of days, are anticipating Lucid to continue to trend down. For the call options though, looking at the volume, there's a consensus for it to be above 350 by the end of next this week, and looking at puts, it is anticipated for it to be sub $3. Looking at the open interest for the call options, with it now expiring, or I guess March the 1st now concluding, you're going to see a very small bump up. Probably it won't actually amount to much, but you do have 2,000 in open interest at that $3 strike price that market makers are going to cover. It would have been a lot better if they were able to close above 350, but there wasn't really enough to get above that. So I'm going to talk on technicals and whatever else right now. So with it closing at $3.33, it is between this pivot and the R1. So I'm looking at the 1 minute chart as well, so the fib levels. So today it was very volatile, so it did attempt to break past this R3, didn't really have enough, so it kind of bounced off of this R3. But as far as the low, it also had the pivot point right here. So very wide gap, but nonetheless it does insinuate that it does want to move up higher. So quickly going back over to the 4 hour just to give you a viewpoint on that. So it is trading between this pivot and this R1. So very strong support and resistance points that you need to take note of is $3.24, which once again it did bounce off of for today, and then $3.59 is going to be the next strong resistance. So based on the technicals right now, with it looking here, so it is lower percentile, the Bollinger Band, and it has been attempting to get into the higher percentile. Right above that though is that damn 50-day moving average, so two different levels of heavy resistance. I'm going to break that down for you on some expectations going into next week on my weekend video, so stay tuned for that. Looking at stochastic though, you do see it at 37. Despite that though, you see a nice deviation, so white line above the red showing a bullish sentiment is starting to form. So you have a lot more optimism behind the scenes, so that could really stand to help Lucid, and especially with Lucid and the damn 50-day moving average, when it does break above that, it definitely does break above that. So it typically results in maybe like a 15 to 20% return at least. So that definitely is something to kind of watch for. And looking here, number of retail investors were flat over the last little bit. If anything, ever since looks like on the 15th, they have been slowly getting out, but over the last couple of days have been flat. So all in all, I feel like the technicals are still very much primed and ready. Options today were somewhat bearish, so not necessarily the best, but given shorts and what they were doing, I see that as very optimistic. So let me know your thoughts. Give yourself a shout out. Have you been buying Lucid, selling Lucid? What have you been doing? And when it comes down to this news, do you think that there's more to it than what is actually stated, or do you think that there's going to be possibly more of these other entities kind of incorporating and getting into a bigger deal under the PIF umbrella? So what's your thoughts? Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. One final thing, this promo has been extended up until March, so take advantage of this. Just sign up for an account with Moonwith for $100 add-in, and they give you 5 free stocks. Each stock is valued up to $2,000, so take advantage of this. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.